We're back. The pod has no name. Finishing up part two of The Way of Kings. With me today, as always, Tom. How's it going, Tom?
Things are good. Things are good. We're recording today on a mellow and cool Sunday morning here on the East Coast.
Maybe one of the most beautiful Sundays we've had in months.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. You
Sun is
have any
shining.
outside
Not a
activities planned?
not a cloud in the sky.
You have any outside activities planned for the day, Tom?
Uh no. I will probably go to the gym after this, and then yeah. So not really, not really.
Ah,
But
well,
maybe I should.
something to consider. Something to consider.
Certainly.
Now, this week we finished up part two and the interludes. Our
Hmm.
second set of interludes here. Definitely some interesting chapters going on.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of plot, I feel like some things are starting to become more clear, but I'm still waiting for like a massive pin to drop, and I wonder if it was the last interlude that we read. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that
Hmm.
in due time. First up was chapter 26, though, and this was an interesting chapter because it starts off with the hype that the Dalinor that we saw fighting the Chasm Fiend
Hmm.
is going to make an appearance rather than the brooding thoughtful Dalinor, but there's a little bit of a twist there as well. But before we get to that, Sadeas starts his investigation as he was made the High Prince of Information from the last set of chapters we read, just as Dalinor and Adolin are getting ready to prepare for this Chasm Fiend assault. So interesting play by Sadeas here, and you can tell that he's starting to his motivation with Dalinor. Does this open your eyes in any way of what you think his ultimate goal is? Kind of maybe just a threat that like he could like letting Dalinor know that he can kind of control uh him to some degree.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's a power play to that point, right?
Yeah.
Where he's basically like saying, "I'm in this position where now I can delay you from doing what you want to do." So it's just kind of a, as the kids say, a flex.
A flex. That's right. Now he decides to do this like on the way, like as Dalinor is marching, to where the Chasm Fiend was sighted. I guess Sadeas and his uh, investigation crew just kind of tag along.
Hmm.
And Dalinor continues to do this, and this is kind of why he reminds me of Eddard Stark so much. Like he just openly talks to Sadeas about the Way of Kings when you can move in silence, Dalinor. You can practice the Way of Kings and not openly talk to your rivals about it.
Hmm.
Um, but Sadeas mocks him for that. And shows the real disconnect there between the two ex friends. Um, the real interesting part of this chapter comes when they get there though, and they're preparing for the assault. Um, and it's the first time they've talked about the thrill, um, Dalinor particularly. Some a little bit with Adolin as well, but this is the first time that Dalinor is able to like where the thrill wears off and he views battle negatively.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess almost like they use the term battle. Kaladin's chapter they use the term battle shock. I don't
Hmm.
think that's necessarily what Dalinor was experiencing here, but definitely his viewpoint on everything is starting to really change, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think his position on the war, and kind of like where things are going, and he brought up whether the possibility of withdrawing, because it seems like a little bit of a lost effort. I think all of that's compounding, and then when he's in the moment, initially he gets that rush, that thrill from being back in the moment, but his true feelings on the war and on fighting in general come to fruition, and he kind of has that moment of panic in the middle of fighting the Chasm Fiend.
Yeah. Yeah, and we should also mention that him and Adolin, despite the previous chapter when they had like that huge argument, um, they kind of squashed the beef before this march in a very simple way, but I thought it definitely made sense for both characters. Um, and Dalinor seems to be understanding of the fact of what Adolin had been saying to him. Now, at the end of this battle, and this is what I think is really interesting because
Mm-hmm.
it will have to, once we finish up chapter 28, we'll circle back and kind of, because I think it all comes kind of full circle. But the Parshendi shard bearer that he sees, like on a distant plateau, it makes it seem, at first when I first read it, I thought that maybe he was there and then he was just with the retreating forces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but re-skimming it, maybe did he get there late? This Parshendi shard bearer, or maybe he was just watching from a distance and just didn't partake in the battle. Um, but regardless, he the fact that now. I was confused if we have seen or heard about Parshendi having shard bearers, before this moment. Do you remember that at all?
So I don't know. I don't believe they specifically have mentioned it before, and I think that's why it's significant. And I
Yeah.
do agree. It's kind of interesting that, and it might be like a little bit of an ominous sign that the shard bearer is now looking over the battle after it finished. So it's almost like he and the Parshendi are goading uh, the Alethi into like these battles over and over again for these gem hearts, and they kind of have a ace in the sleeve to pull at some point here, because if this was truly like a dramatic dramatic battle, or they felt like they truly needed to win, obviously they would have their shard bearer on the front lines of it. So I think they have another kind of card to play here,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and I think
And
that's
they
what they
think,
were getting at there.
yeah, and they think the whole Dalinor and the Alethi's whole plan is kind of like beating them into submission, like grinding them, like a war of attrition almost, I guess you could say. But I I think we with these chapters, I'm starting to believe that the Parshendi are not nearly as close to being depleted as they think. That maybe they could do this for a long time. Um, and I'll wait till 28 for the full thought because it ties in with the conversation Dalinor and Adolin had. But before that, we can do chapter 27. Um, now this was Kaladin's chapter, and we found out about like this apothecary knobweed sap scheme
Mm-hmm.
that's going on. And I wasn't sure if this was like just a small like background like world building type thing, or if this is something that could come into play later. Um, but I guess all the apothecaries are like fixing their prices to make more money out of it, and Kaladin is now kind of inserted himself into the scheme, as he should, to get his profit off of it. Um, and I do think it is very very part of Kaladin's character that he feels pretty like would you say like gross is the right term? Like he doesn't feel good about charging money, or he thinks that the medicine should be free, right?
Right,
Uh,
right.
but it's a nice, it's like the mob world of Rashar, the seedy criminal
Yes,
underground.
yes. The dark streets of Rashar, and the
Yes.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Uh, I mean, I guess in order for Kaladin to like pay his way out of these war camps, he's going to have to earn enough money, and so maybe this is part of that, or maybe this comes back later. Like if Gaz finds out he's involved in this, and whatever, he gets like turned in for being a part of this. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how it plays out. But for now, I think it's just more of like a little interesting world building nugget.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of that, we got to see what's at the bottom of the chasms, between the plateaus here. Kaladin and the bridge crews get put on chasm duty, which this reminded me, they go down on ropes into the chasm, but this reminded me, I'm sure you've seen King Kong with Jack Black, right? The Jack Black King Kong.
Yes,
Okay,
once a
so
long time ago, but I
once a
will
long
try to
time ago.
stick with you.
So there's a scene there where they're like on this log above a chasm, and there's a T-Rex and King Kong fighting on it, and the log breaks, and they fall down this chasm, and at the bottom of the chasm is like all these insects that they're fighting, and it gets crazy at this point.
All right, all right.
I feel like if you saw the scene, you would know what I meant. But I thought that like visually, like dark, mossy, moist, strange creatures. That was really the vibe that I was getting from the. It helped me visualize it. Is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I I like I like the little background nugget that there's the chasm fiends kind of live in there, and like they don't normally bother you, but if you like cross them by accident, they could just kill you and your entire crew almost immediately. It's like,
Yeah, like
oh,
entire
that's
like
great. That
legions,
they're
right?
keeping everybody on edge.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
kind of, for some reason, I got like Land of the Lost or like Jurassic Park vibes. Like
Okay.
they're like
Journey to
kind
the
of
center of the earth.
they're kind of like, yeah, like sneaking around this chasm and like sneaking around, and like it's so enormous, and they're like to scale, like they're like so small, and like they're worried about these enormous kind of dinosaur like crab creatures.
Yeah,
It's kind of
yeah.
like, I don't know, like a whole thing.
I'm curious. I guess when I was at first, I was a little bit confused on like the width of the chasm and how the chasm fiend can fit down there. But I
Mhm.
guess maybe it opens up the deeper you go down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it seems like they go down there just as like to recover like loot. I guess you could say gear,
Yeah.
uh,
It's
which
very video game esque here.
yeah, very video game esque here. But what I'm thinking is, the way it was described sometimes in the chapter is I guess some army, like in some battles, like groups of soldiers will get pushed to the edge and just get, knocked over. So I guess there is like, thousands and thousands of bodies potentially that, that they can scavenge. Now at this point, some of the crew, Kaladin has like from what we've seen described in earlier chapters, the most talkative of the bridge crews probably at this point.
Mhm.
And a couple more, join in on the conversation and camaraderie. This guy named Moshe is definitely his biggest hater. He's like
Yeah.
the he seems to me like if this was like a high school clique, Kaladin has his clique, but then Moshe has a nastier clique that is not fond of him. Um, that's kind of how I'm interpreting this social situation.
Yeah, it's very high school drama.
Very high school drama, yes, yes. Now, what did you think about the spear dance thing?
So kind of interesting. So like
Yeah,
basically, uh, and we know like Kaladin kind of has this special connection to like spears and weapons in general. Like in his excuse me, in his flashback chapters, it's like clear that like when he picks it up, there's almost a like a like a like a spiritual presence around him.
he
There's
gets
like
like a
a
rush.
right. So like I guess they're kind of seeing this and experiencing this for the first time, um, and when he does this spear dance, and it kind of just in my mind's like it's reaffirming what we know Kaladin was like as a soldier in the past. Like
Yeah,
these things are still present, and hopefully we're gonna get to see him fight again here in the coming chapters.
yeah, and I think too, like when you do it in parallel to the chapter as when he was a kid as a flashback, and he fought that kid, and he lost, but he said when he held the quarterstaff, like he felt something that he had never felt before. Um, So, in parallel to that, I think it is a really, cool scene and like just kind of affirmation on who Kaladin is. And I think, his arc right now is really just finding the balance between, can you save lives by taking lives? Can you save lives by fighting? Because it seems like he wants the spear in his hand and he wants to fight, but he also wants to save. What he thinks he should do is be saving lives. So finding that balance there, and I guess like looking for what to fight for, is an interesting, kind of the way his arc is going. I would love for him to eventually overlap with Dalinor. I feel like Kaladin and Dalinor are two characters who seem like would, you know, once the Herald and like Voidbringer thing comes to a clearer picture. I wonder if Kaladin and Dalinor would cross paths eventually.
So I'm getting so I forget if this was in 26 or in 28 upcoming, but Dalinar and Adolin are kind of like discussing bridge crews and like what the right way to do a bridge crew is and like whether to
Yeah.
do it like Sadeas, and like Dalinar basically decides like, oh, let's try one bridge crew.
Yeah, so
I
I was thinking, is that
feel
one bridge crew going to be four?
it's got to be bridge crew 4. I feel like
Yeah,
we like it's destiny at this point to kind of bring them together.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, but before we get to that, we should just touch on the end of this chapter well, two more things actually. But at the end of this chapter, Kaladin has like this like a group like campfire, and they make the stew because Rock, our stationary chef, local chef here, turns out that he can cook up a good stew for the boys, and everyone, including Moshe, comes out for the stew. And the next morning, when he tells everyone to get up for their exercise, they all still get up except like Moshe and a couple detractors. But overall, Kaladin has won over the men of Bridge Crew 4. So it'll be interesting to see now, on the next bridge run, how they fare, if they can keep that level of camaraderie and togetherness.
Yeah,
Before
who would
that
have
bridge.
thought? Who would have thought jumping into a book in the fantasy genre that a major theme would be just male bonding? You know,
Male bonding, yeah, it's happening a ton. I mean, I love it, love it.
just a really interesting way to go. Like spending all this time like entrenching us in like how men in leadership, particularly like in a military situation, like win over the affection of these other men.
Yeah, yeah, it is a common theme here. It is a common
It,
theme here.
I don't know. I mean, I guess like in other fantasy novels and like other just materials, like a lot of it, like you don't get to see that stage. You get to see when it's fully baked, and that leadership and those people are like completely respected. I guess like an interesting parallel is kind of like Jon Snow with the Night's Watch.
Yeah, maybe even like a little Rob, like from Caitlyn's chapters in Game of Thrones, like
Mm-hmm.
after Eddard died, a
Yeah,
little bit
that's
of
true as
Rob.
well.
But in
And
other
this,
ones, I can't. That's really the only one that I can think of that is similar in a way.
yeah,
Like you said, like Lord of the Rings, his Dark Materials. We didn't see that really.
right, yeah. So we're kind of just doing it. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's certainly a
Yeah, I also it's unique for this one too, and we talked about this before, but because Kaladin started in a position of power and how we saw, you know what I mean? I feel like we're only halfway through the first book, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of Kaladin because we've seen him, from be in power to fall all the way down to the bottom to the point where he has marks on his face, saying that he's basically a slave and not even an expensive slave.
Mhm.
So to see him now start to rise back up, I feel like this is like there in some cases, like the story could have started here, right, for Kaladin. But we have all this like background information now that it seems like he's going to go a lot further, and I guess the leadership kind of getting the winning over the hearts and minds of the men arc that he's had through parts 1 and 2, I guess will springboard into something even bigger here. I will say though, it will crush me if Keft Rock and if he loses the bridge crew after everything that's happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like
know.
if it's going to crush me.
It's a real it's a real ragtag bunch. You know, the Island of Misfit Toys, Bridge Crew 4 here.
Yeah.
Um, obviously he's running the bridge crew in a way that's completely unique to anyone else because everyone else is just ready to die. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a little emotionally charged if we see some of our favorite characters, particularly Rock. I mean, obviously, I think Rock is the clear fan favorite here.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if we were to cast Rock, it should just be the Rock, right? To
Yeah,
play
or
Rock.
I don't know. I kind of get like Bautista vibes.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like particularly like Guardians of the Galaxy Batista,
Yeah,
like that kind of role.
I feel like we just paint his face and we get some like little horns and we're ready
Yeah,
to
throw a
roll.
couple one-liners in there. We're in.
Yeah.
Okay, now the other thing that we had here was we found out that the Parshendi grow their own armor.
Yeah, interesting. Like it's like an organic material that's like I thought this was something like is it they grow their own armor or is it maybe I misinterpreted or is it
No,
like
yeah, I
something
think
that
it comes
they're
out of their skin.
yeah, okay, so it's like organic, so it's like part of their being.
So here's a couple things about the Parshendi that we've learned the past in part two. Like super athletic to the point where they can jump from chasm to chasm without poles or bridge crews or any of that. And now they grow their own armor, and this is from people who that they considered the parshmen that they knew were just like servants that didn't do any of this. So the Parshendi, there's definitely we've heard mention of this thing called like the origin and the gem hearts that are in the shattered plains and the effect that might have on the Parshendi. um I'm getting like maybe like how like this like in Black Panther Wakanda is like secluded and like nobody knows how technically advanced they are.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
starting to wonder if the Parshendi because of how close they are to the chasm fiends and how easily acquirable gem hearts are, if they're maybe like super advanced on the low and just nobody knows.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, uh, and we'll get into this. I'm always hopping ahead to the next chapter.
Well, that was
Kind
it.
of
That finished up
it's kind of
27. Now
becoming
we can go to
my
28.
thing here, but like getting the background on the different cultures, like we do with the Shins, uh, in the Rising chapter, and then the Axies chapter, kind of learning about like that weird species. It's
Yeah.
interesting to see, like obviously the Alethi think they're the superior race. It seems like right. They seem
Yeah.
like they should be the ones like ruling the lands, but there's all these like interesting little pockets of um, different species and yeah and I know and we've talked about this like a ton over the course of all the pods we've done together, but I just love those little touches of world building and nuggets of information
Yeah. I
help that
also
help
love
contextualize the story.
Yeah, and I also love the bizarreness of it all. Like I love how like with the different like races and things, like it's much more Elder Scrolls than it is like Game of Thrones, right? In terms of like how like crazy and the variance of the world, with Spren and all these different things. So yeah, I mean Sanderson has done an incredible job bringing the world to life, and it's so large that the fact that you only get small pieces of information from different cultures and different things and in pockets, like brings it along at a very nice pace. Like it never feels really overwhelming,
Yeah,
which is nice.
and some of the comments on the Reddit page have like led me to believe that uh, Sanderson has written kind of multiple sagas or stories within this same world. So maybe
Yeah,
there's drops and dribbles of information that we're getting here, but in a different story, in a different saga, it could be like a POV completely from that character's like species or race, and those things are more like normal and happenstance. So it's just kind of interesting. I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting just how he has all these kind of connecting parts
yeah,
throughout
definitely.
these multiple stories too. At least that's what it seems like. I mean, people can correct us on the Reddit thread if that's kind of a miss there, but
No, I think you're right because people had mentioned the Mistborn series to us when we first started this, as something that we should look forward to, when we're done with this. So yeah, I think you're spot on there. Now, now that we're officially on chapter 28, I did want to mention there's a conversation Dalinor and Adolin have here about like the larger impacts of the war. There's money here, so the Alethi will probably always have a presence. It's not like they're just going to, completely pull out and leave. But also talking about how, the closer proximity to gem hearts, what that will do to the value of them. Because right now, I guess, I guess you could say right now they're the, like, is there almost like an oil analogy here? Like it's the most sought after resource maybe in the world. So because that, it's such, I don't know if abundance is the right word, but like acquirable, much more easily, because of the chasm fiends. What does that do to the value of the gem hearts, and long term, what impacts does that have on the Alethi? So I think these are interesting, much broader, deeper, hard hitting questions that Dalinor is starting to prepare Adolin for. Because we
Mm-hmm.
know in this chapter he's kind of going back and forth on if he should step down and make him High Prince. But I just wanted to talk about that in context to what I said about if the Parshendi, the Parshendi being in close proximity to the Gem Hearts. I think just there's a lot more to them that meets the eye, especially, they have the Shard Bearers, the different parts about their anatomy, jumping from chasm to chasm and having, armor grow out of their skin. I truly believe that what the Gem Hearts and the Parshendi and, where they retreat to after that battle. I think it was saying that they retreat towards the origin. I think if I understood completely, I think I'll need a little Reddit help with the origin. But that's how
I think that's right. Yeah.
yeah. And it seems like it was either just like where the sun sets on the horizon, and that's where they were retreating in that direction, or the origin is like the back end of the shattered plains that they haven't reached yet. I was unsure if it was just like the horizon or an actual place. But yeah, I think there's a larger Parshendi, mystery here that's yet to be resolved.
So can you clarify something for me real quick? The
Yeah.
gem hearts, are they a source of power? Like what is their worth associated to?
So what I've taken it as is that the gem hearts power the shard armor, the shard plate.
Okay.
The gem hearts power the shard. I don't know if they power the shard blade because you like conjure the shard blade. So I don't know if you actually how the gem heart powers it. But we know the gem hearts power the thing Jasnah had on her hand that
Oh the
made that cleared the rubble.
mhm,
So the
mhm.
gem hearts powered that. Um, and with the chapters from Shallan's broke, like her family's, I guess the gem hearts became obsolete or were stolen, or I
Mhm.
forget exactly what happened there. But yeah, it seems like the gem hearts just power everything that's cool that's been described to
Okay.
us as powerful.
All right.
Um,
Fair enough.
yeah, yeah. So that's my general understanding of the economy of the gem hearts at this point.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, that makes more sense. So it's interesting that Dalinar is kind of thinking that that's like a depreciable resource. I guess because they're so readily available that they're like losing their worth. I it seems like if they are used to power uh, all these devices and the shard plates and the shard blades and all this stuff that they would not lose their worth. But I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm not an expert on Roshan or Roshan economy.
Yeah, it was a conversation that I wish was maybe a little bit longer. Was a little bit longer between Dalinor and Adel in there because I do like that. That is, an interesting topic. Um, I hope maybe they'll revisit it. I hope there's a deeper, when we learn more about the gem hearts and when they get deeper into the shattered plains, um, that would, I just try to think about it in context of like, how Rock told us how, his people don't have any shard plate. Um, and other families, or not other families, but other princes, their family might have one, and you pass it down from generation to generation. So I guess maybe what Dalinor is thinking is that if they're more readily available and everybody starts to have, shard plate, shard blades, what does that then do? You know what I mean? If this is now something that's going to be readily available to different kingdoms. How does that maybe threaten Alethi power? I think maybe from that context, it makes a little bit more sense than just like depreciating value. Even though it did, more or less that's more or less what he said regarding like the value of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's one of the things that's going to play out here as
I mean, it's interesting too because right after this, Dalinor, he keeps thinking to himself about how come laborers or like the working man doesn't have shard plate, and he goes to like big this massive trench,
mm-hmm.
With his shard blade and his shard blade, and he it's interesting that he was thinking that like how come like he could do the work of 30 men that it would take them a whole day to do in maybe a couple of hours, but it's looked down upon to use the shard plate in that kind of way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it's I mean, I guess it's kind of a nice metaphor for like the advantage of the wealthy over the working class. Like they have the tools and the means to help the working class do what they're doing far more efficiently.
Yeah.
So maybe Sanderson was kind of getting at that.
Yeah, I thought it was just like a like like how a boxer might like go to the punching bag to clear his head and thoughts, whereas for Dalinor it was like he just needed some hard labor. He needed to get his hands dirty.
No, I definitely think that was part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we had Sadeas' investigation, which didn't prove anything, but they did the men that they interviewed about the cut strap were very, very pro Dalinor to the point that they maybe unconsciously, made him look a little bit more suspicious, which is interesting. So Dalinor made Adolin investigate that while he went and did his hard labor, and that's when King Elikar's mother comes, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of stops him and confronts him about the conversation because they were supposed to meet after that dinner, when Sadeas was named as the High Prince of Information, and seems like Dalinor had forgotten about that.
Right.
So that was interesting. But him and Navani, are talking, and interesting conversation like about their past and whatnot. And Dalinor, I think, more or less at this point, is just trying to like shoo her off. Doesn't seem like he
Yeah.
wants to entertain any conversations with her.
It's very much like father like son, with Adolin kind of blowing off his days.
Yeah, very much, very much. Now,
And then we get a cool device here.
yeah, this was kind of crazy. So we have the I put in our notes it was like a call because it was more or less like a conference call with Jasnah.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like how it works is from thousands and thousands of miles away, Jasnah writes down, I guess, on a board, and then where Dalinor is, what she writes down comes up, and then vice versa, so they can communicate that way. Now in this conversation, he kind of sends out Dalinor. It seems like Dalinor, other than Adolin and Renarin, Jasnah is probably who he trusts the most outside of them two. At least that's the vibe that I get. So like he kind of sends her like there's other people in the room, like a little bit of a message there. But it was funny that when he told her that her mother Navani was in the camp, he didn't specifically say that she was in the room. So it was interesting for Jasnah to say that like keep her at arm's length. She bites, about her own mother. An interesting family dynamic there.
Yeah, it's very clear that her mother is on her own path and doing whatever suits her best.
Yeah, I agree.
Is her own power player in this situation.
Yeah, like maybe seems more closely aligned with like Dalinor than say Sadeas, but is definitely her own kind of X factor here. Now there was a lot of, and keep in mind, throughout this chapter, you have Dalinor kind of weighing, should he step down as High Prince, and he was going to before Navani had interrupted him during his work, he was going to make this decision on if, whether or not he should step down and make Adolin the High Prince. And, by doing that, he would have to go back home to, Alethkar. And I guess once you step down, you just like live the rest of your life on like the farm, I guess, or just at home, like retirement life, I guess, so to speak. So
Mm-hmm.
he wouldn't necessarily be able to like be an advisor and be involved is the vibe that I got.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I interpret it, at least. Whereas if he stepped down, he wouldn't, be able to actually be as heavily, or if at all, involved. And I thought that was interesting context here as Jasnah starts to ask him about, first meeting the Parshendi, if he saw any shard blades then, and the relation to the Voidbringers. Now the Voidbringers and the Chasm Fiend drawing that she drew, it seems like, so what we read in the prelude, right before the very first chapter, was this
Right.
4,500 years ago, this battle before time.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that happens, and then let's say maybe like 1,000 years or maybe goes by,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess people remember that the Voidbringers existed, but they don't remember what they looked like, so they
Mm-hmm.
document it by like the biggest baddest thing that they can think of at the time, which is a Chasm Fiend.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, people, I guess, started to associate Chasm Fiends with Voidbringers just because that was the biggest, baddest monster that they could visualize. And
But this is likely its whole own beast that
yeah,
we're not even.
yeah, that
I feel like we gotta get introduced to a Voidbringer here.
yeah. So now I'm starting to think with this thing called the Origin, and it seems like, I feel like I've said this a couple times, but every week it seems like we the curtain gets pulled back just a little bit more, and you think something like huge is about to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but then they just pull the curtain back a little bit more, and it never actually has that that big reveal moment, and that's not a complaint at all. I think it's been very well done, but I keep inching up towards the edge of my seat at the end of these chapters and weeks before we pod, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, a lot of things are happening. It's keeping my attention, but I'm like you said at the beginning, and like you're kind of saying now, we're still waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly.
We
Exactly.
need that oh shit moment, or that oh shit stretch, and maybe that's part 3.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this kind of, to me, confirms that Dalinor's visions and, everything that's going on is true and accurate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting that he doesn't perceive it that way. I thought it was interesting that after this conversation with Jasnah, that he didn't connect any dots. But, I guess he was pretty set in his way. Um, and, from his perspective, it does seem like he's crazy, right? Without
Yeah.
like as the reader, like we look at it, much different than how Sanderson is going to write Dalinor to understand it. So interesting balance to understand, but
Certainly.
yeah, I hope it seems like, I don't know if we're going to get a Dalinor chapter for a while, but
Mm-hmm.
I hope he doesn't step down, man. I hope that somebody stops him.
Yeah, it feels like the type of thing where he's going to like talk to Adeline about stepping down, and there's going to be some sort of huge event where like that gets lost in translation,
Yeah.
and it's like a little bit unsettled for like a few chapters or maybe a few hundred pages, where we'll find out like what's the fate of his role with the kingdom.
Yeah, the only thing I can think, like the only thing that I think the biggest argument for him stepping down is that if he doesn't step down and he goes into battle and continues to like lose the thrill mid battle, it seems like people are going to notice that eventually, and that that's when he's going to get ettered.
Right.
So that's the one worry, but we'll find out in part 3. Now we did have a few interesting interlude chapters here.
Hmm.
The first one, I liked the first two were interesting because like I don't think that these characters are important at all, other than just giving us a small piece of information, which is great. I love these chapters. The first one, Interlude 4, we're introduced to Shinovar, and this is when I was telling Tom before we started to record. I did some serious map research this week because I was getting tired of not being 100% sure where the Shattered Plains was. So now I know my geography is a little bit better. Um, so we have Shinovar here, and this is with Szeth's old owner, or one of his old owners, who seems just like a simple tradesman that like probably didn't use Szeth to do any of the cool things that he's capable of.
Yeah, I think Seth made a reference like he worked for a merchant like that was like nice to him and like it was like a positive relationship
Yeah, yeah.
at
So
one
this
point.
is him. Well, an apprentice, and the POV is an apprentice of this merchant.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess he has a unique relationship with the Shin because he's honest with them. He doesn't I see I from what I understood, it seems like he drops the salesman act for the Shinovar and is just kind of like straight up with them.
Hmm.
And they respect that and pay more because of his forthcomingness and honesty. Um, so cool little tidbit on like Shin culture and how they kind of do the same thing back to him. Um, Very interesting dynamic in terms of like a world building perspective of how the Shinovar like culture and society works.
Yeah, and kind of getting into how like you can't cheat them and like what they value and what they don't value in kind of their unique lifestyle and their unique way of thinking in contrast to the Alethi, which I think is kind of more aligned with what we're used to.
Yeah. Now, one thing I that I can't wrap my head around is why is there no Spren? Like, what about like Spren seems to me, from what we've learned so far, like a life force, something that's just everywhere, and the lack of Spren doesn't really it is confusing to me. I'm a little bit confused. I wonder if it has to do with the high storms, like how because maybe there's no high storms that like I don't know. It doesn't bring any Spren in if that's how it works. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think the part of it is just like they live in this desolate, you know, wasteland basically, and there's like little to no life, and it kind of folds into the way that they live their life, and because the area is like that, I just guess there's no spren, there's no
yeah.
life force.
So I feel like the point, just the point of this interlude was to, I think it was a prelude to the last interlude with Szeth.
Right.
Just showing us his old owner, maybe giving us a little bit of insight into the Shinovar and how they are. Um, but yeah, interesting little chapter there in terms of world building. Now, before we get to that Szeth chapter, first we have Axies the Collector. And this chapter was very confusing at first because we are in a different part of the world than we've been yet, right? And Axies is a strange character for sure.
Yeah, he's I actually liked Axius. He's a happy go lucky guy, seems pretty positive,
Yeah,
a
Axies is the
man of
man.
science, a man of science, and he has some pretty fucking cool powers.
Yeah, like he could just do all of this cool shit. When I was first reading it, was thinking like, is this guy a herald? Is he one of the heralds that we saw in the prelude? Because he
Hmm.
seems like he doesn't really give a shit about anything. Like maybe he was beaten into submission and now he just is a drunk and lives his life. Um, but that was way off. Um, yeah, but Axios was pretty cool. Seems like he just researches Spren and he has a lot of time to do it. Doesn't really care if he gets arrested because time ain't going anywhere. We're just going to keep studying the Spren.
Well, didn't he say there's like jail spren or like I don't know. There was some sort of spren that he could study while he was in jail because he was
Yeah,
in captivity,
he
spren or something.
something. Yeah, but what got him arrested was he wanted to look for intoxication Spren, so he was getting drunk to look at the Spren. But I guess he got too drunk and got all his clothes stolen off of him. Woke up in an alley. Um, so definitely an interesting guy. But
Tough looks.
there is this part here where this whale spren, I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but he described it like coming out of the water the way that I would imagine like a big whale would in like a dramatic movie scene. And let's read here. And then it looks east towards the origin, and it cycles through a bunch of different faces. Like it forms, I guess, a bunch of different thousands of distinguishable faces. Now, I don't understand the connection. I think there's a connection between the Spren. Like there's something there, right? There's a point to this interlude.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the origin and the faces and the Spren and how it's, I don't know. But I imagine unless we're just getting introduced to Axies because he's going to be a player, in the story later. But I wonder, that part really intrigued me, and I was wondering ever since we've read it if there was something more there with the origin and the spread. But yeah,
it's pretty. I don't know. I think maybe part of it is they're just introducing us to like this new, especially like the main one that they're all worshiping, like this, just more world, more kind of like mythology of this world, and learning about the Spren.
Even if there was like no point to that chapter, I love the interludes have been one of my favorite parts about the book so far.
Yeah, me too. Me as well.
Yeah, I think they've been very well done. And we got
remind me of my love for what's her name's chapters from His Dark Materials.
Who? Not Lyra.
No.
Mary Malone.
Yes, Mary Malone.
Mary Malone, that's right. Yeah, 100. I'm on the same page as you.
Same feels.
Yeah. Now, we did have a Szeth chapter here, and he did some cool things. Little surge binding, little shard blade action. Now at this point, the last time we saw him, he had like a normal, I guess, master, and at this point, his master is like a criminal, like seedy, like crime syndicate guy, and he's just using Szeth to kill his competition. So like simple, assassination attempts, I guess, like that. So on one of these runs, when he gets there, the guy's already dead, and shady, hooded man in the corner, kind of confronts him here, and this is when we find out that he had also killed his current master, and that he now possessed this shadowy figure now possesses the stone, the oath stone. So he leaves him at this point. Szeth knows what he has to do, follow this guy's command, but he's been fearing this whole time that somebody is going to have the oath stone that knows what he's capable of and can use him to do some truly horrific things, I guess. So I wanted to flip back to the page here to see, because he listed a couple of names, right? Not a name, but maybe 6 high princes, a Saleh of Garantark, and the king of Jakaved are all about to get offed by Szeth. Now, here's what I wanted to ask you, though, because he said 6 high princes. Are high princes, does that mean that he's going to have to go to the Shattered Plains to kill the high princes that are like with King Elhokar, or are high princes maybe a more broader term in Roshar and they're not necessarily Alethi related?
Yeah, I don't think it's Alethi related. I think it's more like a class thing.
Okay, so like different kingdoms also have high princes.
Right. I don't think it necessarily eliminates him going to the Shattered Plains to do this killing. Like, it could be the case.
Yeah.
I don't recognize any of these names, but I don't think it necessarily means he will be going there. I think this is more like, oh shit, like after like kind of wandering around after being this like famous assassin, he's been found, and now he's gonna be sent to do some real shit.
Yeah, and it seems like the King of Jakaved seems like a big one to me, because from my understanding, and definitely help us out, listeners, if I'm a little bit off here, but if we were to say that Alethi or Alethkar was like the number one most powerful nation in Roshar at this point, from what I understand, second would be Jakaved. So, or Yakaved, maybe it's pronounced. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so taking out their king, maybe like could they pin that on the Alethi, and now you have an Alethi, Jacques war. Is it like I'm going to assume here that whoever Szeth's master is just looking for ultimate chaos, like is maybe trying to
Yeah.
like plunge the world into as much chaos as possible. Um, which brings me to this: do we think that this person who now has Szeth's Oathstone is like somehow related to like Voidbringers? Like ahead of like maybe like a rekindling of the battle that we saw in the prelude 4,500 years ago. Is he going to try to like plunge the world into chaos ahead of when the Voidbringers come back? I don't know. That's just my aluminum
Potentially.
my aluminum cap is on, and I'm looking for some theories, some predictions.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think it's more so this guy might work for a certain kingdom, and these might just be like enemies of the state, and it's gonna kind of shake the snow globe up, like you said, and create some chaos.
Yeah.
But I think he is acting within the best interest of the state.
Okay, interesting. We just don't know who that state, what who is supporting him at this point.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, here's another interesting thought. Let's say Szeth, takes out the king of Jacques and a couple high princes, in short succession here. Does
Mm-hmm.
Dalinor, and that news gets back to, the King Elikar's warcamp in the Shattered Plains. How do they respond to that? How does Dalinor respond to that? Does that, make him, not relinquish, being high prince and stepping down? Does it maybe drive them to want to come home quicker? I imagine that through all the POVs that we've had so far, Szeth going and doing Szeth things is going to change a lot for the dynamic of the world that we've seen up to this point.
Yeah, I kind of wish he was less of an interlude character, and we got more focused POV.
Yeah, do
But
we
maybe
think that he?
maybe that's coming down the. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, do we think that he's ultimately going to be like a villain, like just a POV villain, but except that he doesn't like he knows he's a villain, but he just has to do it. Like, he's such a fascinating character to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know because yeah, I guess we're gonna have to see what direction they're gonna take him in. I mean, it might be something that like he's more in the background in this book, and then when we go to like books 2, 3, and then 4 approaching later this year, that he's like takes more of a lead role
Yeah,
in those.
yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. It's so it is interesting. Just because he kind of like views himself, I guess, like a robot, like very robotic, like he's the Kawhi Leonard of this book for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just interesting, like he knows, like, I really hope nobody gets my Oathstone who knows what they're doing with it. That'd be a real shame for the world.
Yeah.
But like, I'm still going to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like he has no choice.
Yeah, he has
He's
no
beholden
choice.
to it.
Yeah, super. I don't know. The Szeth chapters really get me because my mind always just starts turning. He's going to have this big, you know, he had the big prologue, but there's something else on the horizon for Szeth, I think. And this chapter also made me want to ask you a quick,
Mm-hmm.
what if scenario. At this point, if you had to, if there was going to be one big like one-on-one showdown, like I remember when I first started reading um, Game of Thrones, like you were set up for like the Hound versus the Mountain, or like Jaime versus somebody. So I've been playing with the ideas of that a little bit with the Way of Kings. So what is your, as of right now, the characters that we have so far, what is your dream one-on-one fight that you want to see before the series is over?
Uh, so I think in terms of like just power, it would be like a shard bearer versus Szeth. But in terms of like the story and plot building, I think it's like if we see like a Kaladin Sadeas thing
Yeah.
for the way Sadeas treats the bridge crew, and then just Kaladin kind of rising back to power. I think that would be kind of a great
No, I'm
a
with
great one.
Yeah, Kaladin versus Sadeas is definitely up there for me. And I wanted to say too, like that first, like Szeth versus King Gavilar when he was, full plated up, um, like running that back with anybody would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe like Dalinor versus Szeth would be crazy.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
probably be.
Shardblade versus Shardblade combat. I don't. We haven't really. We got a taste of it, but I want some more.
Yeah, I want some more. I'm getting a little bit, starting to get a little bit greedy, I think.
Or maybe our boy Cal kills Sadeas or kills the Parshendi shard
And
bearer,
he gets it.
and then he gives the shard to Rock. He fulfills the
Oh,
destiny of that culture.
look at that. Look at that. And then Rock
I'm
becomes.
gonna use that as my part 3 prediction. I'm gonna give that bad boy a 5.
That's your part 3 prediction.
Yes,
Okay. Putting a 5-piece on it?
I'm putting a 5-piece on it.
What did I say earlier that I was super confident in? I know I had a good prediction. I forgot to put a stamp on it. The point total.
I think it was in general you were getting into the Parshendi and kind of their society.
Yeah. Okay.
That
But they're
thing
low
and
key
like how
Wakanda. That's what I was saying. That's what I
they're
was saying.
they're low key Wakanda.
All right. All right. I'm going to put 7 on that because I think I'm
Ooh.
absolutely right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty sound logic. We'll see. We'll have to see how it turns
The
out.
logic is there. Now, any other takeaways from the end of part 2? I mean, I feel like we've learned a lot in this part, and the setup, like now that I feel like Kaladin like is kind of established with Bridge 4, Dalinor with Adolin, like that is kind of right on the cusp of being like swinging, one way or the other, like the ball is about to drop in that arc, more or less. Szeth is out, unleashed. So I feel like part 3 is like, shit's really going to start to hit the fan here. Were there any other like final takeaways or anything like that from part 2?
No, it was kind of more like a lot like part 1, like more of a building up to like a boiling point type of part. We haven't really had that boiling point hit, but it seems like everyone's kind of storyline is getting to that place, especially Dalinar and Kaladin. Their storylines are kind of getting to a place where some shit's about to go down.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that's part 3 or if that's part 4, but it feels like we're getting close to some wild shit going down.
So part 3 is only has 2 POVs. We're back to just Kaladin and Shallan. But I wonder if maybe through Shallan we're going to learn more about what Jasnah was getting at in her message to Dalinor, regarding like the Voidbringers, and I'm sure we're going to hear things in her chapters that kind of corroborate what Dalinor was seeing in his visions, maybe, which will be really cool. And then somebody told me, I forget which, it was a comment a while ago when we were talking about the epigraphs, and I remember somebody said that in part 3 they begin to become a little bit more relevant. So the epigraphs, I think we'll start talking about them before every chapter for part 3, if you follow me.
Yeah, that's what people have been saying. The epigraphs. I read them and I just nothing really going on.
So so the ones in part 1 made no sense to me. It was just everybody's like last words. So I definitely thought that those definitely were not relevant. In part 2, I think somebody said it was the part 2 epigraphs were related to another series, another Sanderson series, within the same world. So I wonder if maybe like those characters. I do wonder if those characters have like any relation to like the Voidbringers and the stories from the other series. If it all is it like one giant, just like maybe in different time periods of Rashar. I don't know. But part 3 apparently seems like they're going to be a little bit more relevant. So we'll pay a little bit more closer attention to them, and we can try to decipher those for next week.
Yeah, and so let's see what we have. We have Next week, we're doing a little bit of a short week. We're gonna just some background. I'm going on a little vacation towards the end of this week, so we're gonna do up through, what did I say, chapter 33, 32.
Yeah, what page?
It was like where's my book?
So part 3 starts on 561.
Mm-hmm. I was in like the 325 range, or I'm sorry, so it starts on 561, so I was in the 620 range.
Okay.
It was like 60-ish pages. I forgot exactly what chapter.
I'm going to skip ahead to 620 and then the next chapter after that.
All right. So what do you know 30, what the numbers are?
33 starts on 618.
Mm-hmm.
So 33. Do you want to do up to 33 or up to 34?
Let's do up to 34.
We'll do up to 34. So we'll read it including 33.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we're going to be doing that recording on Wednesday night. So I'll get it out either Wednesday night or Thursday morning. And then that way, when Tom gets back from vacation, we can do a back to like 100 pages per episode.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Good pod. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah. Any other closing thoughts for going into part 3?
No, I'm ready to roll. Ready to keep this thing going.
Card out of the book. I'm in shambles.
That's right.
In shambles. Anyway, yeah. So we'll do up to and including chapter 33 next week. We added a couple more predictions here that I'll write down in our Reddit post. Hopefully, we get some good speculation from the commenters this week. Now that we're springboarding in the part 3, as always, feel free to comment like any mailbag questions, any topics that you think we're not giving enough attention to. Feel free to drive discussion, in the comments, and we can definitely bring it on to the podcast next week. And then, yeah, as always, thanks for listening. The pod has no name out.
Bye-bye.